Welcome to the SBP Podcast, the voice of mobile film. This is episode 53, and you're listening to. And I'm your host, Susie Botello. I'm excited about our guest in this episode. Alexandra Guillossou is one of the contestants in the 2019 International Mobile Film Festival in San Diego. Her film, The Deepest Cut, was selected as this year's Community Stories. Now, her story is not the happiest one. It's actually not very happy at all. Her brother has multiple sclerosis, and she shares his story from both his point of view and her family's point of view. My heart goes out to her and her family and every other person around the world and their families who are suffering through a debilitating disease. I created the Community Stories program around the same time I launched the film festival 10 years ago. It was the first category that the film festival had, and we later created a program around it. It's not just one of the categories anymore. Sharing a story from within a community or a culture is the main theme and requirement for this program. If you're a part of a community or a culture and you would like to share your story, we support you. We just ask that you use a smartphone camera, and we know that there are people out there who have stories of their own communities or culture that we feel the best way to share those stories is through you. Don't wait for someone else to share your story. We believe that once you practice mobile filmmaking and smartphone video, that you're capable of sharing your own story and telling that story, and you don't need to rely on others to tell it for you. There may be reasons, like a person, you, waiting for the media to share your story, or perhaps you're told that you need to pay a producer, or that's your belief, in order to make a film about your story. My own experience as a producer and working for organizations alarmed me to create this program so anyone with a smartphone can share their own stories. After all, no one gets your story and your message better than you. Now, there's one more thing to note, and these are for the harshest stories, that the process of production gives victims and people affected by an event some personal relief. By the way, tickets are on sale for April 27th and 28th in San Diego for the International Mobile Film Festival. Go to sbp.cc, type that in as a URL on your web browser, and click on Tickets to get yours. Quick shout out to our sponsors, Sorts and Circuitry Studios and Uncharted Regions. Then there's also Red Giant, Film Convert, Black Box Global, Hall Late Show Podcast, Star Wars Steampunk Universe, Grip and Shoot, and the Indiana Filmmakers Network. Are you ready? Let's go and talk to Alexandra. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the SBP Podcast. We are here with one of our newest friends, Alexandra Guillossou. Did I say that right this time?
You sure did.
How awesome. Way to start this podcast.
Yay.
We've been getting to know each other here for a bit, and the reason is that we have this wonderful guest with us tonight, and I want to really share her with you, is because she submitted a film to our film festival. It's called The Deepest Cut, and it's actually one of my, if you've been listening to the podcast you'll know that this one program that we have, this one special category in our film festival, is very dear to my heart. It's called Community Stories. And the program, as you found out, Alexandra, is about people sharing their own stories from within. So
Right.
if you are, and now a community can be a culture. It could be a cult. It could be your family. It could be you. It could be someone very close to you. But if you're a part of that community, then you can share the story of that community instead of waiting for someone else to share it for you. And also because, well, we all have a phone with a camera. So,
Right.
it's a perfect, and I like to push that. I like to push that because I think that the best person to share your story is you. There are professionals out there that know how to really structure a story, and it would take time for them to know what you really want to get and what exactly you want to share and what emotions you want to evoke in your story. But I think that we're at a point right now where you can learn how to do that with your smartphone. You can go out there and figure out how to make films and then turn around and do what Alexandra did. And so I'd like to begin by asking you, Alexandra, to share with our listeners, who are you?
I am a freelance exhibit designer. I've been doing exhibit design for 22 years. And a lot of people don't understand what that is. I'm that type of person that designs the interactives and interpretives and graphic panels that you see when you go to zoos and aquariums and science centers. And over the years, as I was working on exhibits, I found myself needing to express these ideas in a more emotional manner. It seemed to me that text and images just weren't quite enough to really connect to people. So I started to edit videos. A lot of them were more promotional things that I was sharing with clients, just to kind of, tug at their heart so they could really, I could show them that I really understood what it was that they wanted in their exhibit, in their museum. And I'm sorry, that was me, and I should turn that off. I'm going to hit quit right there. And
What happened?
oh, I dinged on my side. I guess you didn't hear that.
I didn't.
Oh, good. Sorry, everybody.
Did any of you guys hear that?
Hopefully not. So yeah, so I started moving on towards video because I just felt that it was a better way of getting that storytelling, that emotional connection to viewers. And now I sort of do half and half. I still absolutely design exhibits, but whenever I can, I try to introduce that storytelling through video into that. And now I'm actually starting to do some stuff on my own, like the deepest cut piece. And I'm planning on doing even more if, this really something I really feel passionate about. And especially with things like documentaries. I mean, I'm always interested in, I'm one of those people that when you're in the shower or, I'm working out in the morning, all these stories just come into my head. And before I know it, 30 minutes has passed and I'm really working on the plot. I'm really working on what this thing's going to be. And now I'm getting the angles, I'm getting the music, and I'm really going over what everyone's saying. And that's really fun. But I actually kind of realized that at least right now, when I try that for real and film that, I'm not quite as good at that as I am when I'm talking to someone and doing sort of a true story.
Mm-hmm.
That's why there's something about documentaries that I don't know. I'm really drawn to. And when I meet these people, there's so many times I meet people and they just tell me something about themselves, and I just stop suddenly and say, God, I think we can make a movie out of this. I really think I can make a short, because this is such an amazing story. And so immediately, as they're telling me whatever the story is, I'm starting to do that same thing where I feel kind of bad because I'm absolutely listening to what they're saying. But in my head, I'm also like going, wow, I can actually see how I'm putting this together. And yeah, and now I'm going to go here, and then we're going to do, and it's this really strange process that's happening. So I was so excited, that I was actually able to do the first piece, because to tell you the truth, when I put together The Deepest Cut, it was a surprise vacation,
Well,
with my
let's hold
parents.
on. Let's do
Oh,
this. How
okay.
about that you actually share with everyone a little bit about the synopsis, basically about the the story.
Sure. The story is really focused on my brother. My brother has secondary progressive multiple sclerosis, and coincidentally, but in a sense maybe not so coincidentally, in my mind, my mother also has secondary progressive MS, and
Was this before or after?
yes, my mom got MS in her 30s. But what's really interesting is my brother got MS. We thought when he was in college, but it turns out he really probably got it when he was around 12 years old.
Oh.
And we just didn't know it. It was, it started out as a really subtle thing, and then, a lot of times with men, it tends to progress more rapidly than in women.
What
So,
actually is that? So that, because not everybody knows what that is.
what happens with MS is it's like a deterioration of the myelin sheath in your nerves. And what happens is then the messages to send, that your brain's trying to send through your body no longer gets to your body in the right way. So with every person, different things happen, because you just don't know where these lesions, that they call them lesions, you just don't know where these things are going to occur. And so one person might suddenly have slurred speech. Another person might drag their feet. There are people with MS that can just be really tired all the time. They just never have the energy. And then a lot of times, when you're in the first stage of it, um, you'll have some sort of symptom, you'll have some sort of flare up, and it totally knocks you off your feet. And people don't know why, because you look completely normal. Like there's nothing wrong with you. You're just, why are you tired? Why are you, what's going on? And it might take you several months. It could take you a few years sometimes to recover from what that is. And then it goes into remission. When you get to things like secondary progressive MS, you start to show symptoms in a way that just don't go away. So, for example, when my brother walks, I mean, he can hardly stand up straight. He's very wobbly. He does actually look like he's a drunk, and when he talks, his voice is very slurred. It's very difficult to understand what he's saying anymore. He falls down a lot. So does my mom. My mom falls down. She falls down all the time. I mean,
Ugh.
it's actually kind of stunning the way she does, because she might just be standing there. The next thing you know, she's on the ground. She's fallen down, and you just don't know. You just don't know how the disease is going to hit a person. And I think what's interesting about it is that a lot of times people with MS. I mean, it's a good thing. You want to stay positive. You really want to look at everything day to day, and just take it one day at a time. But one thing I've learned is, especially with having two people in my family have it, is that people just, it's one of those things where you just really can't understand it unless it's happening to you. And the reason why I believe that is my mother couldn't really understand my brother's MS. because
Mm.
she for many years was not as bad as he was. And so she always had a very positive outlook and, yes, I can beat this and it's okay. And, I'm just having a down day today. And
Well, not to mention that everybody already has a different personality anyways. There are,
right. Right.
yeah.
Exactly. And so she had a hard time. She would get very frustrated with him because he didn't have the same outlook. Well, I found it very interesting when she finally, and it was really just last year that she was diagnosed with secondary progressive. The change in her whole demeanor was just, night and day,
Oh,
because suddenly she she was there. She was in his shoes, right? So she had this new understanding of what he was actually going through. And as an outsider, for me to kind of see that transformation made me just realize that much more, that it's really just one of those diseases that is, it's I find that it's really hard to empathize,
and
because
you were an outsider, but you were also an insider, which is how this whole thing led to you making a film about it, right?
right, because this is my life. This is happening all around me.
Yeah.
Every time I'm with my family, that's what it is. I mean, it's right there in your face. And I just found, I just,
I remember when we were talking about it, because you submitted your film and I watched it, and like I watch all your guys' films. And I remember watching it and I was thinking, I wonder what made this person decide that the phone is always there. It's with
yeah,
you. So, and we were shooting photos. You were at a family event. You were in a vacation or something there.
yeah.
And you decided at some point, something said, I'm just going to record it. How did that? And I remember you telling me that, but I'd like you to share that with our listeners, because I think this is something that happens more often than not, and it can, but it also has this really interesting, you know, there's a really interesting story that made you do this.
Yeah. It actually had been several years that I had been watching my brother on these family vacations. And it's really strange. I get my phone out and I just sort of, as I keep saying, I kind of surreptitiously would record him because, I didn't know how he felt about it, but it was just eating at me. I would almost just look at him and say, I just have to tell this story. I mean, we can't go through the rest of our lives without people understanding what his story is. And finally this year, when we went on the vacation, I was filming something completely different. I was filming my daughter and her cousin. I was like, oh, I'm going to put together this funny little film. And we were, getting all the shots in. And my brother from time to time would come down and I just stop everything and I just run over and I just film them. And the whole time I was filming them, I'd say, well, I'm just getting some footage of you to show the craniosacral therapist and the yoga instructor, because he came to visit me once and he saw both of them and they really helped him. I was like, I'm just going to show them how things are going. And I just kept doing it under the guise of that. And so for 4 days when we were all together, I just sort of pretended that was all I was doing. Or we'd sit, and when we were all sitting together, I just sort of pan the phone around and make it seem like I was really getting everybody, but I was really trying to sort of focus on him. And finally, on the last night, I knew I couldn't let the opportunity slip this time. And I just looked at him. I said, I really want to do the story about you, and please tell me yes. And it'll just be a small documentary, and I think it will be really great. And my brother, who pretty much never talks to anyone anymore, looked at me and said, yeah, let's do it.
Uh-huh.
And I went, I was shocked. I had a good microphone with me and everything that I brought down, because this is how much it had been nagging me. So I had all the stuff with me just in case.
Oh, well, great. I happen to have a whole production bag here.
Yeah. And so I went into, we went into a bedroom, And I sat down and I, hit record, and it was this magical moment where for about 20 minutes, he just told his entire story of what this was and what it meant to him and what it meant to, his family and his sons. And I was just so amazed by it that after that happened, I grabbed my mom and brought her in a room and said, Mom, I think I'm going to put together this documentary, and I just want you to tell me about Greg. And she gave, 30 minutes of a testimonial, and my father did the same. I mean, it was this moment where I think they never had before, where they were able to completely open up and let it all out, what this disease was, or especially concerning my brother and what it meant to them. And
that's part of the power of documentaries, where filmmakers go out to create a documentary, and that's happened to me too, where you're interviewing people. You may not use them, but they're pouring their guts out and their heart out for that, and they don't even realize how much they were feeling until they have that moment. And it's almost like going, when you hear people in the movies where they go to the psychiatrist and they're like, I don't need a psychiatrist or a psychologist or whatever, or a counselor. And they go there, and next thing you know, they start talking, and then next thing you know, they break down and they're like, oh my God, I don't know where all that came from,
right.
Yeah.
And I think it really worked too, because when I was taking these testimonials, I really wanted to record them, but I knew that if I did, I wouldn't get the same story.
Yeah.
So it was all just audio. So in the end, I had, over an hour's worth of audio. And then I went, oh crap, I have almost no video because I was just, barely taking anything.
Right.
So, I did a few sort of headshots of them. And when I got back home, I went, oof, I don't know what I'm going to do with this. And somehow I was able to whittle it down to, 5 minutes. And then there I was left with whatever little video that I had, and had to weave that full story together with the two. But I obviously, whenever you do these types of things, you never shoot enough footage, right? You just never do. But I think I was able to bring it all together somehow. And
I think a lot of times the opposite happens, though, where you have so much that, especially with interviews, the interviews can get very, very long, and you have this time constraint because you're trying to match everything together and structure everything. And so, I mean, in my case, it's always been like I have so much, and then I don't use them all.
Oh, yeah.
So, and also because, especially, when people are on camera, you want to have, what we call in the industry B-roll. You want to have things that are matching what they're saying. So the viewer is not just sitting there watching a head with lips and eyes just talking. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Exactly. Which was why I think it was also good that I didn't video them while they were talking. I mean, I had to resort to other ways to tell that story, and I think that's why the headshots of them work, because I wasn't trying to match a voice, and then I had to go out and find those, create those other pieces that did tell that story that they were all like weaving together. I think that's what made it more powerful than having just sat them all down and, put the phone on tripod.
Telling the story. That's what made your film, you had a good structure because you were always concentrating on telling the story. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, that was the most important thing. And I think that even now I could do it again, because that story is so strong. I almost feel like you could do it 5 different ways and it'd still be equally powerful, because the kernel of it is just strong enough that it almost in a way completely matter what what armature I put on top of that, that structure was just there.
When you were just talking about how you listen to people and whatever story they're sharing, you create something big in their mind. I was actually thinking while you were saying that I was creating something. No, but I was thinking, that's kind of like the same concept of, and if you think about it as an artist, like let's say listeners, you're artists and you get this idea or something, you see something or something that inspires you to create a work of art. Let's say you've got this black canvas in front of you and there's a story there, but you haven't really drawn it out. And the person who was sharing their story with you is already drawing a picture. And now you, Alexandra, are actually filling in that picture with all the colors, all the background, and maybe some, maybe you're putting stars around them or connecting them to other things and adding texture to it.
Right.
And I think there are a lot of people like this in the world where, and we do this without even thinking about it. I think everybody has a way of doing that. But there are other people who do it more and are more conscious of it. And hence the storyteller.
Yeah.
Because there are stories all around us. I go to a coffee shop and I'll talk to a complete stranger, which I do very often, unfortunately. And the first thing that they do, I love connecting with people. And there's one thing that always, my way of starting a conversation with someone, there's a thing where people go, how do you even start a conversation with a complete stranger? Well, just always remember people like talking about themselves.
Exactly.
So, exactly. So if you ask them any question that relates to an answer where they get to share something about themselves, all of a sudden, that's it. You just open the door.
Yep, that's right.
So, yeah. And depending on how much they're trusting you based on your response, and people can sometimes see it in you in the way that you're listening, that you care about their story, that you are seeing a bigger picture, know, and they would like to help you paint that picture. They want to help you understand their story better. We are all we're all evolving around stories. I mean, everything, everywhere. In my world, it's all about stories, and filming is just the best way to do that. We were talking about that earlier before we were recording about how important stories are and why that is the best medium to share something with people.
Yeah. I mean, because it's part of everyday life. I think there are people out there that don't realize that half the conversations they're having that day are a story. Yeah. I mean, they might not all be the best stories, they're not Academy Award winning stories, but they're stories nevertheless. I mean, that's how we communicate with one another.
And that same story, depending on the storyteller and how they tell it, right?
Yeah.
Can be told in a complete, like, you can have two people with the same story, but one person is heard with way more enthusiasm, right, than the person standing next to them with the same exact story.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's part of it. And that's why I believe that, I mean, let's talk about this for a second there. So you had your phone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you decided at that time, I mean, you were trying to be sneaky. Yeah. And I'm sure listeners were listening to this and going, God, that's kind of rude. That's kind of insulting. That's probably an invasion of privacy for this poor person. But then I let you go because I knew where you were going to end up. But I could just imagine them thinking, are you telling me that she did this? And then the poor guy was just like, it's like, no, you did have the respect for him to go up to him later and say, hey, would you mind? I got to share this with you. And that's part of the story.
Absolutely. In fact, it's funny that you say that because my husband knew that I was trying to do this and he was insulted. He was offended. He said, I can't believe you're doing this. He's like, he clearly can't stand what you're doing. I went, oh, no, it's fine. It's fine. And I was like, it's just my brother. It's okay. And that's why it was so, I mean, it was such a relief in the end when he actually even said to me, he's like, are you going to make me famous too?
Aw.
And so the story behind that story is that I had done a promotional video for the St. Louis Aquarium here in St. Louis. And my daughter, because I had to that entire thing, obviously I collaborated with people, but I mean, that was me. That was like, my idea. I pitched it to the client. I told them with confidence, yes, of course I can do this. We can make this happen. And then, I had to cast it and I had to like storyboard it and I had to, direct it and, and help with the shots and edit it and do the sound. And so when it came to casting, I was like, I've got my daughter and she loves doing this stuff with me. So, I had I found 3 kids and it ended up doing, I mean, it brought me to tears because I never thought it would do so well. For my first, that was that kind of my first launch out into the world, really, in any way. And I think that it got over 600,000 views, and I was floored. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe how this was a video about an aquarium, but I wove a story into it because I was like, people aren't going to care. Like, people aren't going to care until I give them a story. So I made this whole story about these 3 kids, and it had to do with this whole thing with a historic building in St. Louis. But so that's why it really connected to all the locals, because they know this place, they know the magic of the place. And I just sort of brought that out. And so then they're like, oh, wow, fish, I mean, it's just fish, but it turned into this whole magical thing. And because of that, that's why my brother was like, oh, you're going to make me famous too. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I will. Because I think that'd be the greatest thing if I could make you famous too, and you no longer have to, live with this on your own. I mean,
and you don't have to pay him.
Right. Well, exactly. Like I don't have to pay her. I think I had to pay her somehow. Food, I don't know what.
like we all end up doing. It's like pizza and craft services and. Yeah. No, but that's awesome. But that, it does have that, if you can say that, happy ending. And he's watched it, right?
Oh yeah.
And what was his reaction when you first showed it? How did you even come up with that? Did you have like a family gathering? Okay, I'm going to show you now.
No, because I don't live anywhere near them.
That's right.
My parents are in Virginia. My brother's in North Carolina. So, I ended up making a private video on my Vimeo and with the password, and then I just sent it out to them and said, okay, here it is, let me know what you think. And to tell you the truth, I have no idea what my brother thinks of it because, like I said, he generally doesn't talk to anybody about it.
Right.
Now, I have spoken to him since it has been out, and he's never said anything to the effect of, I can't believe you did this or anything like that. He just simply doesn't talk about it. We just talk about other things when we talk. I don't know if maybe it's just not in.
Did he see any of the footage or anything before you made the video?
No, he didn't. I just sent him the video completed. And I know that when my mom watched it, she told me that, it brought her to tears, and she said, I'll never be able to watch it again. She's like, I can't watch it again. And my father actually watches it he's watched it several times and continues to watch it. And he told me it brings him to tears every time. And I think it's because they're all seeing, it's one thing to tell a story. It's another thing to watch the story you've just told.
Yeah.
And I think the impact on them is probably
they're living it.
Really
they're living it. So they're not, unless you put it in that context, I don't think, and I think more people should do this, because what happens is you're going through an event in your life, and it's an event. It's not really constructed in a way where you can really get something out of it. And maybe your dad is looking for something, a message in the story.
Yeah.
And he doesn't realize it or something. I don't know, but I think that there's some truth to that. When you interview people, like, like I have before, and they're crying and sobbing, and you know that you're not going to use them, in your video, that they're not going to. Sometimes it's because of what they go into, and it's like, oh, it's off topic. I need to stay focused on what my story was or whatever.
Right.
And sometimes it's because, well, I've already got 30 other interviews like this, especially if they're victims of some sort, right?
Right.
And they're crying and they're very emotional, but it's therapeutic for them, to do that. And they don't know it. I mean, it's one thing to sit in front of a psychologist, right? And it's another thing to sit in front of a camera where you're set up, where people are like, let me make sure that you look okay. Let me make sure we hear you very well.
Right.
So we're really listening to you. We're really focused on you. We're really paying attention. You don't get that attention even from the best, well-paid, no offense to any psychiatrist out there, but you're not going to get that. They're not going to put you in front of a light and say, want to make sure you look good, want to make sure that I record you well. And this is, when people say recording, that's a forever thing. Someone wants to keep that. Someone wants to use that. Someone, whatever. So at that moment, it's very therapeutic. Yeah. And to see it put into a story can sometimes give people, even especially if it's their own story, part of their own story, it can give them we were talking about perspectives. You're behind the camera, you're getting your perspective, but the viewers are getting their own. And if you're really good behind the camera, and when you're putting this together, you know exactly what the viewer is feeling. And in your case, you played that really good, because it's a tearjerker for sure.
Thank you. I know it seems weird to say thank you, but
well, I mean, you affected me with it. I'm a little mushy. But I know that that I'm not an idiot. I know that was something that affected, and that does and will at the film festival. It's you guys, if you submit films to film festivals, you really should make the effort of going, because there's nothing better than to sit there and watch how people react to your story.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that, because to tell you the truth, so far, everyone I've quote shown it to, I haven't been in the presence of. Yeah. So it's only through emails, or text messages that I've gotten their reaction. And I mean, they've all reacted pretty much the same way. I mean, it hit them all hard, very emotionally. And I think what made it feel successful to me is it wasn't just people that knew my family. I made an effort to share it with some people that knew nothing about it, and just said, here, I want to share this with you, and I want your honest opinion of what you think about it. And their response was just like, whoa, the way they would describe what they thought of that short was exactly what I was hoping people would get out of it. So when it was, especially when I was getting those completely outside points of view, that I felt that I had actually succeeded in what I had hoped to do. And
it's just under 5 minutes, you guys. It's not like, we're not talking about like, oh, it took an hour for people to get it. And that's kind of part of what I'm saying, because some people don't like the fact that there's a time limit or whatever, you know what I mean? But I really do want to bring the filmmakers together and show it at a film festival. And unfortunately, the film festival can't be months long.
Right.
Exactly. I don't think anybody can come for months long. It's a weekend film festival. And it's not just showing films. We have all this. It's a festival. It's a big celebration of it. There's so much involved in it. And to get your foot into the door and to actually share a good story, I believe 5 minutes is pretty good time. And I think you, to be honest with you, it's like, well, thank you, Alexandra, for proving that, with yours.
Yeah.
Because you bring people inside your story, and they actually feel something. And unfortunately, it's going to be proven on April 27th when everybody sees it. And I'm sure you're going to get, because Alexandra, her film is part of this community. It was chosen for that as a community stories program. We like to, if the opportunity is there, to select one of the films from our film festival to be a part of this program every year. And I'm glad that we had your film this year to select it to do that. So
it's a real honor. I mean, really, thank you so much for it.
Well,
for sharing it. I mean, because you didn't have to. I mean, really.
Well, you didn't have to film it.
Right. True. But you didn't have to share it. And the fact that you are, it really does mean a lot. It really does.
Well, I think it's very inspiring. And again, the part that I really like is that I get to share this particular program through your story. In this podcast, the story behind the story. And actually, you were talking before about how you see films, make a movie about that type thing. It's kind of like the same thing I'm feeling about your story, where maybe there's somebody in the film festival that says, you know what? I want to do a story on you going through this whole process of filming your brother to make this film, because there's a story there as well. I'm sure wasn't.
It gets really deep, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Just layers and layers of stories behind it.
Just going to say the layers thing. Exactly, though. There's so many layers you could just keep peeling, on this. And your family, who's coming with you?
My husband and my daughter. And you actually see both of them in the movie, in the short. So
you're bringing your not the protagonist, but you're bringing your extras.
Yeah, my extras. As my husband says, the star, because he's like, I'm the real star. Because somehow he's always like right there in the shot. And I told him, I was like, it wasn't intentional. I was like, you just happened to be there every time. And I was limited on what I could use. And, I was like, sorry. And the thing that's really funny is he was always drinking a beer because we were on vacation and trust me, he's not an alcoholic. It just happened to be that of the little footage that I got, he always had a beer in his hand.
But so he's the beer guy. He's the
beer guy. He's the happy beer guy in the background.
That's pretty cool. And your daughter is also. What is your daughter? Is your daughter inspired maybe to make films also with her phone, or?
She's actually more inspired to be in them. In fact, I've used her several times for narratives.
Yeah.
And she loves it, and she just thrives. And after doing that aquarium project with her, now whenever I talk about working on new pieces with a cinematographer friend of mine, she always just looks at me and she goes, well, she's like, you have me, I can do this, whatever you need me to do. So right now she really likes being on the side of the camera that I don't like being on.
Yeah, I hear you there. What we're not going to be doing too much justice here if I don't ask you these next questions, but basically, did you use any apps or gear or anything like that you can mention? Or
I was using Moment lenses, and I was using Filmic Pro, not solely, because I think there were times that I was just using the regular camera on the iPhone. So I shot it on an iPhone 6. And I believe it or not, I didn't bring my gimbal. I probably should have. And I didn't even have a tripod. So when
So
you're
it was
sitting
all
when you're
handheld,
sitting
huh?
on a yeah, and when you're sitting on a dock that's kind of swaying,
Oh,
so when people watch it and they might see a little bit of a sway, that's what's going on. Like everything's kind of swaying a little bit as we're doing it. But my brother was swaying a ton, so I think the whole thing kind of worked. And
so it wasn't the beer.
it wasn't the beer. It wasn't the beer at all. But and then I edited in Premiere,
Mm.
and believe it or not, I did the sound. It was the first time I've ever done it. But I made the soundtrack on GarageBand, so I'm on my iPad, on that little tiny keyboard, because I played piano for 15 years, and if I had a piano, it would have been one thing. But I'm trying to like squeeze my fingers on this little tiny keyboard on my iPad to make the soundtrack for this. But I think it turned out, I think it turned out pretty well, and it worked the way I had wanted it to. So I was kind of excited about that too. I'm looking forward to doing more soundtracks as well with,
I think more people should. I mean, well, look, I'm not trying to put people out of business or anything like that. Some people just may not have it.
right.
But there's so much you can do with GarageBand. I make a lot of the tunes that I use for this podcast on GarageBand on my
Yeah,
own. Just because it's like it's time consuming to go out looking for things.
it is. Yeah.
And it's a weekly podcast for the most part, so it's kind of like, well, I mean, let me just make my own stuff. I do it with a lot of my videos too now, and plus I'll be honest with you, if I open up GarageBand, I go into the zone, and I don't think that I am talented enough to say, oh, I create music, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's something that I do with that purpose of just, especially because I know a lot of times it kind of goes into the background,
Mhm.
so,
Yeah.
or it's for my own videos. I don't feel comfortable
But
enough to,
but it's actually it's what we were saying before. It's
yeah,
part of that invisible ink, right?
right.
It's part of really what brings that entire story to life. And when you can control what that sound is in the background, that's where you can really amp up what that emotional response is that you're hoping for.
Well, and you had, so that's another thing, I just want to say to that, like, you don't want high pitched music in the background while you have a woman with a higher pitch voice,
Right.
because they compete with each other.
Uh-huh.
And you don't want a lot of deep bass music with lower tones when a guy with deeper tones, in his voice is speaking either, because
Hmm.
then it cancels out. So when you're creating music for your video and things like this, you're able to control that better.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, you're looking for just the right thing, and it could take forever. And then you realize, I just needed something,
Yeah.
you know?
And then what, I think it sounds like I do it sort of backwards from a lot of people, maybe not everyone. And I think part of it is, from my background. So I was a professional dancer for 10 years. And, when you
Amazing.
choreograph, when you choreograph, it's all about, well, at least for me, it always started with the music. And so a lot of times when I edit videos, I have to hear the music for, I have to hear what the sound is, what that vibe is, that feeling, before I can start stitching together the video and the audio. And I don't know. It's really strange. That's always my starting point for some reason. I have to hear that sound in my head. And then from there, and I'm such a visual person, but in this case, it's not so much. In this case, it's the sound first,
Mm.
and then I can build the visuals on top of that. And when I add that layer, that's what helps the whole thing sort of, well, it just sort of flows. And I've tried it the other way, where working with people and they're like, well, cut the video first and I'll make the music for you. I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I'll try. And then I feel like I'm kind of wedging things together a little bit. And so then what I had to do is I spend time like finding something that's sort of inspiring
Yeah.
musically that I know I'm going to have to ditch. And then I put the piece together to that.
Yeah.
And then the sound person puts the sound on it. And what makes it sometimes a little challenging for me is I'm like, well, I got so used to that first piece that, I really made everything work to that one. And now I'm like, my brain has to like sort of rearrange itself around what now the final cut of music is. And I
Well,
sort
you
of,
can bring, because you said you used GarageBand.
yeah,
And some people listening right now may not know this. Sometimes I don't know what I've got in front of me or what something can do because, there's only so many hours in a day.
right.
And they turn to, those hours turn to days. And then next thing you know, deadline. But basically you can bring, and I've done videos both ways where I'll create the music and then I'll cut a video to it in the editor. But there was one time that I wanted to create a montage, which is, a series of clips for some of you who may not know what that is, and then create that with music, right? There's no people talking or anything like that. And so, in order to do that really well, you kind of want to, so you can cut it to the music. So if there's a heartbeat, you can, cut the clip right there and go to the next one, and things like that.
Right.
But I was like, I just saw something in GarageBand. I didn't realize that was there. So I tinkered around with it. So, hey, I can bring a video into GarageBand and I can totally compose the entire music, everything around the video, and then it can get really intricate because you're talking about the textures of sounds,
right?
That can, depending on what the images are.
Yeah, I need to do more of that because I can tell you it's definitely challenging when you're working Premiere and GarageBand separately.
Yeah.
And, okay, so you save, you export how your sound is from GarageBand, at this point. And then you put it into Premiere and you're like, oh yeah, this is going great. Well, now I want to add a little bit more. Well, okay, so in the past, I just go back to GarageBand and go, okay, let's see. It was around 2 minutes and 13 seconds. And then you're
so
like
much
fussing.
math.
Yeah. So all this back and forth until it finally starts working together. And in the end, really, it should be, I should just export the Premiere into something, just, a really small file, pull it back into GarageBand, get it right. And then, just keep working back and forth in that manner.
But you can literally, so you can bring the video into GarageBand. You can actually cut the song to it. And obviously, you guys, I'm just talking about little shorts. I'm not talking about these long, if I was going to do that, I would still do it in sequences if I could.
Yeah.
So there's ways to get creative with this. But then you can export the entire project as a movie file, with good quality and things like that. And instead of doing what you're suggesting, which is another way of doing it, where you cut it along with it and then you export the track as an audio track or an audio file, and then you bring it into Premiere.
Yeah.
And put it on as there it is, for your thing. So there's more way than one to get what you want to get done, and you can go as deep and as creative as you want to. But the thing is, like, you first have to start with a reason for it, and that's your story. And with this particular situation in your case, your motivation was sharing the story of your brother and helping people understand. But did you ever think there was something in it for him as well? Or for your family?
Maybe just some recognition. And I don't mean recognition in terms of suddenly being famous. I mean, just
Yeah.
they get lost. It's so easy for people to latch on to, you name it, MS, cancer, whatever it is, Parkinson's. When it's celebrity, when it's any type of personality or celebrity, once they have it, whatever it is, then it seems somehow, people are like, oh yeah, because so and so has this. This is serious. Now I'm all about it. And I'm like, there are millions of people out there
Mm-hmm.
that have the exact same thing that get completely overlooked. I mean, no one would even look at you twice. And if anything, people would question you and say, like, really, I know someone else who has it so much worse, or so and so famous person has it so much worse because I watched the interview with them, and I'm like,
I've seen people who have broken bones and not really felt that much pain, and others who have just gotten a paper cut and just died right in front of you.
Yeah.
Not everyone feels the same way, but that brings me to think about something. Whenever I meet somebody who has Parkinson's. You guys just Google that. I am not as good as she is at explaining these things. But it's what Michael J. Fox has.
Yeah.
If you know his story, Back to the Future guy.
Yeah.
Basically, usually they always say the same thing. So if you ever see me on a mad day and I'm moving weirder, I'm not drunk. They always say that, and I feel bad when they say that. I'm like, why would I think you're drunk, and, because they have bad days and they have, better days. I don't think anyone in that situation ever has a good day, but,
right.
They have bad days and better days. And, but I feel bad that they would have to point that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think they're powerful stories. And I think it's wonderful that they share the stories. Their experiences with this, but I really just hope that everybody out there understands that the normal guy is going through the exact same thing. And, for me, there's just something about that. I just feel like it's so easy to just be unsympathetic or less sympathetic to the everyday person that's, suffering through the same thing, or facing the challenge of the same thing, because maybe no one wants to say they're suffering through it, but they're facing those challenges. And it's that's the reason why I did it. That's what I hope for my mother and my brother, is that people watch this and they understand, everyone that has MS is going through this, not just the famous people. And they're all dealing with that exact same struggle every day. And it matters just as much, even though millions of people don't follow them and, or watch them on TV or movies. So I guess maybe that's what I was sort of hoping for, because I do feel like in a way, they're both forgotten. And I'm sure that there are lots of people out there, that feel the same way. I mean, not all. There are a lot of people that have great support systems, and they might be listening to this saying that girl's crazy. I mean, I totally disagree with her, but I'm kind of thinking of the people that I know. I mean, they're other people I know with other types of disabilities or diseases that kind of feel that same way, that that's sort of just left out and overlooked. And I guess, again, that's why I feel really passionate about these types of stories. I like to bring their voices to the forefront to say, hey, me too. I mean, it's happening to me too.
Yeah.
And
we're living in a time right now where it's really crazy, and ironic at the same time, that we have access to so much when it comes to videos and stories and things like that, and at the same time we can get so disconnected.
yeah,
But I believe that the stories like this can actually connect people and bring people more to maybe not together, but at least to understand and sympathize.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, guess what? We're all human beings. Doesn't matter, what we look like one day or the other, or some people like ice cream, some people like pizza. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I'm
Yeah.
not trying to simplify it to a point to where it's, disrespectful or anything, but it's like, but underneath all that stuff, we're all people. And we all, it's one thing I always say, we're all on the path, and at the end of that path is the same place we're all going to go. It's the end,
Right.
And so we might as well kind of have some respect for everybody else that's on this path, and maybe even we don't have to hold hands, but
right.
we may even get to chat with someone who happens to be walking alongside of us,
Exactly.
Like, have you ever been in a car stuck at a stoplight and then you look at the person next to you and they're singing or something and you give them a thumbs up and a smile and they're like, cool,
Yeah.
So why not, right?
Exactly.
But yeah, it's a storytelling world. I think there's a lot of power to it, and for people to pick up their phone and not just hit record, but I mean, well, yeah, do that to start with, at least, you know what I'm saying, and go from there and learn from each thing that you do to tell better stories, because yes, your story can make the world a better place, and it can make a big difference for anybody. You just don't know when you share that story. That's, it's one thing to create something, but it's great when you share it.
Yeah.
I don't think any filmmaker out there goes through all that to make a film and then doesn't share it,
right,
with other people.
Oh, I'd hope not. I guess there might be a few people.
Yeah, I mean, no. It's not like painting or something where it's therapeutic, But,
yeah.
I have a question to ask you. We do this little game in our podcast. It's I call it the 20-second shout out.
Okay.
Let's do this with you where what is something that you feel that you could because you like all kinds of movies, but maybe I'll tell you what. How about, because obviously you like listening to stories a lot. So I hate to put you on the spot, but maybe if you don't mind naming people who wouldn't mind being named, you can even just refer to them by first name. They would know who they are. The people who have told you stories throughout your life that had some sort of an impact on you. But I'll time this. Hold on.
Sure. My craniosacral therapist, Colleen, has endless amounts of stories because she's adopted 838, or she's fostered 838 kids and has adopted 4 with miraculous stories of their own.
Okay, so let me start. Let me start the timer, and then right after, you don't have to repeat her. Now we're going to start this timer now, and it's going to go really fast.
Okay.
It's just going to go really fast. Like 20 seconds probably already when you named her and explained who she was, was already gone.
All right.
So
I got it.
Are you ready, set, and go?
Definitely my father. He has a million stories. My brother still has more stories. My husband has hilarious stories, endless stories that I love. My grandfather had great stories. Both my grandfathers, India and United States.
Okay, time's up.
All right.
What are the stories that your grandfather has told you? Which is one story, one quick little story that really made you into maybe who you are today as a storyteller?
Well, my grandfather from the United States, he lived down the street from Dean Martin. And he used to tell me stories about how they grew up together, and both of them sang, and he used to sing songs to me. And I used to sit there listening to him and think to myself, you're so much better than Dean Martin. I can't believe he became famous. And there's just something, I know that seems like a silly story, but there's just, something about just that little it was the whole package of it. It was the whole package of him telling me that how he grew up with him, because my grandfather was just a steel worker, in Ohio. And lived down the street from this famous guy, but had, the same sort of sultry voice as this guy who became famous. And I just sort of love that whole thing about it.
What a great message. What a great message. I mean, guys, you're walking down the street and you're looking at somebody, maybe the landscaper, right? That's working in front of the store or at apartment building or whatever, right? And who would have thought that maybe the landscaper has a story like that, or they grew up with someone who was very famous, and it could have been him. And maybe he decided, nah, that's not for me. I love doing my landscaping, be outside in the sun every day, right?
Yeah, yeah.
How awesome is that? That's a great. I didn't think you were going to have that great of a story to tell, to be a one.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was totally taking a risk there on putting you on the spot. But what a great.
Put me on the spot. As soon as you asked me, all the stories kind of went out of my head, and I was like, "There's got to be one."
Well, I mean, this was like a movie. It's like, phew, she told a really good one, and it totally fit. Sent a great message for our sign off. There's a picture of you that we're going to share with John Goodman. Just tell everybody really quick what that's about.
He was the voiceover for the St. Louis Aquarium, and humble, fantastic guy that really wanted to tell the story the way I wanted it told, and completely worked with me for an hour. I mean, really listened to how I wanted everything enunciated, and he was just super. It was so much fun. And he even in the end apologized because he didn't think his voice was the best it could be at that time. And I was just so honored.
So he was human, huh?
He was completely human. Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
A lot of people miss that. A lot of people think like, a celebrity, you have to, put them up on the altar and they want to be like that. You have to bring them into a room with 1 million people or otherwise, and you'd be surprised how human they are.
Yeah.
And they appreciate the complete opposite sometimes.
Yeah, it was quite a surprise because, you run into everyday people that are just the opposite, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you assume that, this is going to be 1,000 times, what they are is bad. And no, not at all. Nope. I mean, he really valued everything I had to say and was looking for. So it was a fantastic experience.
Awesome. Well, that was a great episode. I hope everyone out there got a lot out of it. How can they, just really quick, we're gonna share with people how they can follow you, but and also we'll share the trailer to your film. Yeah. You really should come to the film festival. It doesn't matter if you're in Taiwan or something. I mean, just come to San Diego. It's America's finest city.
Yes.
And meet you as well. And everybody else that's going to be there. It's going to be amazing. But still, they can at least watch your trailer and they can follow you.
They can follow me at One Mouse Creative. I mean, that's generally what I go under. And you can follow me on Twitter, on Instagram. Instagram is usually just inspirational photographs that I try to do on a daily basis.
It's your thing. You be you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have Facebook, One Mouse Creative on Facebook that people can follow as well.
Where did that come from, by the way, really quick?
One Mouse Creative?
Yeah.
The fact that it just takes one mouse to help you do several things, because the type of work I do, I've had to wear several hats, and so I as a freelancer, I can fill a lot of different shoes, and so I try to sell myself as one mouse. It just takes one mouse, one little computer mouse to do A mighty task.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking about a little furry mouse. I'm going, there's got to be a way I can figure this out.
It's not it's a little, yeah, I use a mouse.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. Well, say goodbye to everybody.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Susan.